Welcome back to the Get Off the Treadmill podcast for practice owners and leaders, where we are obsessed with how to build a successful practice and get a life too. Hi, I'm Chuck Blakeman, and we're going to dive into another topic that helps us make more money in less time, get off the treadmill, and rehumanize dentistry by giving everybody their brain back. Dr. Peter Boulden has been practicing dentistry for over 15 years and has built a very successful fee-for-service 3-location enterprise in Atlanta, Georgia, where he was raised his entire life. He knows smiles from the power to change lives. He's transformed more than 1,200 of them as one of the most credentialed cosmetic dentists in the world. Recognized in the greater Atlanta area as the go-to dentist for high-end cosmetic procedures, Dr. Boulden is the dental professional of choice for celebrities, athletes, prominent community leaders, and commoners like me. Welcome, Dr. Boulden. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Chuck. Great to be on your show.
You bet, man. Love to see how we're going to unfold this thing today. Today, we're going to talk about getting off the treadmill. We do that a lot in our area of expertise. We want to get those dentists to figure out how to get a great business and have a life too. It's a both and. Why does it have to be one or the other? I think that's one of the big lies. So it's not. Before we get you started, I want to just lay the premise quick that dentists, a lot of times when we talk about this stuff, they automatically assume that I want them to stop. I don't know why, but they think I want them to stop practicing dentistry and get a tie and run a business.
Right.
It's not about leaving the operatory. If that's what you want to do, if you want to run the business, do that. If you want to stay in the operatory, do that. This is not about getting off the treadmill. It's not about doing something you don't want to do. It's about freedom. It's just the opposite, the ability to choose what to do with my time and my money. So we want you, the question is, do you get to choose to do dentistry, or do you have to do dentistry? Do you choose to run the business, or do you choose to be in the chair? It's up to you. So I'd like to get you started on this by just giving you an opportunity to share a little bit about how you got into this. Tell us how you learned the business side of dentistry, why you wanted to even get into that, and let's go from there.
Yeah. So the genesis of kind of where I am now and how I metaphorically speaking got off the treadmill was really because, Chuck, I found out that like my highest and best use was really focusing on kind of growing my business. I remember reading the E-Myth Revisited and thinking to myself, like, a light bulb went off. And a lot of the business applications, even as a young boy, I was, buying and selling dirt bikes and flipping them. And, I had my own pressure washing company. So the business applications of stuff has always kind of appealed to me. And I didn't realize that dentistry could be the case until I started thinking, wait, there's no limits on what we can do.
Yeah.
And so, I've told this story before on Craig and I's podcast, that really I was forced out of necessity to become an expert in things like marketing, and running a business, lean and mean, because I started a fee-for-service practice from scratch in 2004 when everyone said, this is a suicide mission. Do not do this. And not to mention that I actually had to go about 10 miles outside because I was on a pretty heavy non-compete from a practice that I was working on previously. I was an associate. And it wasn't actually the most desirable area. It was 10, and so it, so I think fear put a lot of motivation behind me. Right. But I knew that because I was younger at the time, I didn't have a wife or children. I said, heck, you know what? Let's burn the boats and let's do it. And so I tell people that I would do a full clinical day, and then I would come home, again, no wife or kids. I would come home, eat some dinner. Sometimes breakfast, right? And sometimes breakfast, and then go back to the computer and watch YouTube videos and learn the methodology. And back then marketing was way different than it is now. But I would basically make myself a student for the next 5-6 hours in the evening and then step and repeat and do that, and finally put my head above water years later. And it's like, oh, this is working. And I really like it. So that's kind of the quick overview, 30,000 foot view.
What I'm hearing, and I just want to make this, I want to always apply this stuff so people can walk off with things. What I'm hearing is you didn't just go out and get a book or a training course on marketing, fill yourself up and go do it. You were doing something every day. Then you were going home and learning something. You were coming back and applying it, figuring out how it worked, tweaking it, working it out as you go. This was a work in progress. You didn't all of a sudden just blossom into an awesome dental marketer overnight.
Exactly. It's exactly the truth. You know, number one, I had a test kitchen, right? And so I would learn stuff, apply it, and just continually be obsessed with innovation, whether, you know, no matter how big or small. And I, you know, honestly, Chuck, I've never really been one who's been afraid of making mistakes. And I think that's maybe been a curse and a blessing. But you know, but I do think that mistakes are really accelerated learning, because sometimes those mistakes are really painful and they can teach you quick lessons fast. And you know, like, who wants to live their life on the sidelines either and being safe? Like, that's no fun either. So I really wasn't afraid to make a lot of mistakes. And honestly, I've wasted a ton of money in my career on stuff that, you know, in hindsight was a really idiotic thing to do. But like you said, I didn't have a book or a roadmap for someone to tell me who to do it. I mean, how to do it the precise way.
But I also hear it in your voice and in the way you're talking. And I know you well enough that you didn't waste that money. I mean, yes, you did. It's gone, but it was a lesson. You learned from it. And I have a friend, Alan Weingarten, who taught me this years ago. I don't make mistakes. I just have seminars.
With yourself. Yes.
And that's great. You know, and so he says, I try and keep my seminars as inexpensive and short as possible. And I try never to repeat a seminar. And I thought, that's brilliant. You know, let's not beat ourselves up for this stuff. You had some expensive, long seminars. You had some shorter ones, you know, but if we learn from them, then they're seminars. If we don't, then they're mistakes. And I think that's been part of your magic. We say this all the time: planning doesn't create movement. Movement creates the plan. And that's what I hear in in what you've said already. Was I was moving, I was getting stuff done. I took a risk. I was a little bit scared, but I got out there and I did stuff. And it was the doing of the stuff that led you to the better stuff.
Exactly. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Yeah.
So in getting to this idea of getting to getting off the treadmill, one of the things you guys talk about, you and Craig Spodak wrote your book, the
Bulletproof practice.
Yeah, I keep thinking about the subtitle is, you know, your epic practice starts now.
Yeah.
But the Bulletproof practice, you talk about the idea of systems and processes and having a passion for that. That's different than, well, we got to do this crap. But, you know, you talk about having a passion for systems and processes. What did you see that motivated you to learn this discipline of systems and processes and require that your practice run that way?
Yeah, I think that success kind of leads clues, right? And so I recognize that, like, the more I systematize my processes, the more, you know, I almost had to, because of sustainability, meaning that, like, I couldn't focus. I wanted to focus on X, Y, and Z, but if I was focusing on A, B, C, retraining and doing and teaching the next person who just came on board how to do this procedure, it's not scalable, right? My time, that's a linear exchange of time in perpetuity, which drives me crazy. And so I just knew that, like, creating the processes and then kind of offloading them to a manual or a document, a video, whatever, and creating that pathway would behoove me to free me up. And so maybe it was created out of selfishness that I just really wanted to work on other stuff rather than the granular stuff that I've trained and taught over and over and over again. So, yeah, I mean, so that's the systems, I think, just makes the difference. And I don't mean systems like kind of the military, but I think systems and culture and everything kind of plays synergistically together, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, the idea of systems and processes, people think, well, that's for giant corporations, that's complex, enterprise-wide software type of stuff. No, I think we've seen so many dramatic examples of that. One of that sticks in my head, as you said, that was you know, I don't know how long ago it was, 10, 20, 30 years ago, somebody at the University of Michigan put together a procedure to wash your hands before surgery. You know, it's like a little 3 or 4 steps thing, and their infection rate went, even though they were already doing it, they put together a process to make it, to institutionalize it, and their infection rates went down exponentially. And now that's been adopted all over the world.
Have you read that book, The Checklist Manifesto?
No, but I think I've heard about it, and that might be in there. But
yeah, and I think that example is for sure. And you know, so Chuck, I grew up my dad was an airline pilot. And I remember watching, I flew with him on his last flight. I remember literally being the passenger, looking out the window, and, you know, he had flown 40 plus years at this point, but I'm looking at him kind of outside, walking around, looking, and then going up in the cockpit and seeing him. This was before, you could actually go up there and seeing him do his checklist. Right now, he's done this the better part of his entire life. Did he need that checklist? No, didn't need the checklist, but that kind of stuck in my brain that, holy cow, like no matter how versed you are, no matter how much you think you have it down, checklist and processes and audits of the way you do is important, because in his case, life's dependent on it, right?
Yeah.
If he was having a fight with my mom or something was off or he was having a bad day and he forgot to check, I don't know what button, like I'm not a pilot, but I don't know what button, but it is truly a matter of life and death. So I think the same thing can apply into anything we do, and especially into dentistry. Yeah. And not just checklists, but having, the processes and the way that the structure of the way the office. And I agree with you that you hear people say, well, that's just an enterprise solution, right? Enterprises need that because of their scale. And I tell people that's actually in dentistry, if you want a happy balance and you want to enjoy your practice, you need to have it no matter how big or small your office is.
And I think we actually need it more. I've thought a lot about this over the years, and I used to say just that we need it, but I think we actually need it more, because if you got 5,000 people and your company's 40 years old, there's some embedded cultural processes going on that there's a little bit of a safeguard there. But if there's 7 of you, and you're running one practice, and one of you leaves, or 2 of you leaves, and then you've left 15, 20, 30% of your workforce out of position, and you're winging it.
Yep.
And so having those processes in place is even more important for us. I strongly encourage that. I would also say that one of the things we've learned really only in the last 10 years, I've done 12 businesses and 8 industries, and I'm a slow learner. Through the first 5, I just messed it up royally. But one of the things I learned was that when we're putting together a process, the first thing we should do, I used to just go in and, we need a process, and so we'd put together a process. And I finally learned after years and years and years, the first thing we should do is put together the result. And it never dawned on me early on, what is the result we want from this process of answering the phone and having a new patient call us? What result do we want?
Yeah, that's interesting. You started with the outcome. You started with the desired outcome, and then kind of reverse engineered that.
It was actually from reading Stephen Covey's book, Start with the End. Start with the end in mind was one of his mantras. And I over another year or two at percolating, I realized that's what I should do in building a process, because too often the process becomes the result. As long as I'm running the process, I'm okay. No, if the plane crashes, then going through your checklist was not good.
Right.
We got to make sure that the result is we get people where they need to be safely in the right amount of time. So we've really worked hard at helping dentists figure that out. Let's put the result in place first. And it's not, we want the phone answered nicely. That's not a result. We want patient acquisition to go from X% to X%. We want our revenues to go from whatever to whatever with our profits at, we need specific metrics that we know that when we run this process, it's going to make a difference. And so that's been one of my learnings on this whole thing, to add to that whole soup.
And I agree, and this kind of goes into something that I'm really passionate about, is like the goal setting, right? And so what you were kind of saying is, if you don't know the goal line, then you don't know where to run, right? And so defining kind of what you expect and your desired primary outcome of all these objectives, people need the GPS on how to win, right? They need the scoreboard. And so creating those, like you're saying, like the outcomes is excellent. Reverse engineering that. It's
one of the things I saw in your book, and again, listening to you talk in some of the seminars. Talk a little bit more about goal setting. So there's short term, there's long term, and what that has done for your practice, how you see the value of that, and how you might actually help somebody. How do you do that? Let's get practical.
Yeah. So my goal setting, so I have a business coach, in full disclosure, and he really, I was a fan of them long before, goal setting, long before, and really just being an advocate of Tony Robbins. Right. And I remember listening to him as a child. I tell the story of that I used to be stuck at, my grandmother used to house sit in Pennsylvania, and the only book I could get on tape was on Tony Robbins. So all summer long, I would just listen to this Tony Robbins, Unleash the Power, I think it was, anyway. And so I think early on, it was just brainwashed in me to kind of like love the power of the goal setting. Yeah. I still write them down, Chuck, with my own handwriting And I break them into different sections of my life, so because everything isn't about financial, everything isn't about family, so I break down the important sections in my life. And then I go back to what we were just saying. I desire the primary outcome of what I want to see at the end of the year, at the end of, let's call it 2019. I actually do it 3 years out. And then I kind of reverse engineer. So I say, well, if it's 3 years out, what do I want to see happen in 2020? What do I want to see happen in 2019? But primarily I focus on the ones for this year. And then I even break it down month by month. Like what would be the success of the goal this month? Not just looking at the goal and saying like, yeah, I want to make, $1 zillion this year. Right. And just keep looking at that, but without any action. It's just an act of futility, right? It's not going to do anything to you. So you really have to break it down into granular strips so that all right, by March, I need to have accumulated this, or I need to have achieved this.
Eat the elephant one bite at a time.
One bite at a time.
Yeah.
And so I am a fan of the reason I say writing it down and not keeping it on your phone. I feel like that there's something about your own writing that makes you accountable to yourself.
I was going to ask you about that, why you wrote them down, because my daughter is a leadership coach, and she's really into this thing called somatic learning with the body. And when we get our body involved in those kinds of things, I think that's part of the beauty of this. And I've learned from her and from others, when you sign your name to a document, it has a chemical response in your brain. And so I think that's great. I hadn't thought about that. I haven't done that myself. I'll have to try that. I don't know if I can read it or not, but.
And I think your psychology goes to play a little harder. Like I'll make sure to kind of review them at certain times, sometimes at night even. And I think, and I don't know if this is a biological hack, so to speak, but I feel like sometimes your subconscious can go to work for you a little bit on creative solutions. Maybe yes. I'm getting a little woo-woo, but
no, I don't think you are at all.
I do think that there is something, because sometimes I will wake up and I will actually have epiphanies on like, holy shit, this has been my block, right? And so I'm just a big fan of it because number one, I've seen amazing things happen because of it. And number two, it's created a document for me to look back and be proud and reflect of my life. And then number three, I just think it makes things real exciting for your life. I think it gives you a lot of purpose every day when you've got an agenda and all these things you need to accomplish. I think it just gives a lot of purpose to your life, and depending upon what those goals are, right? I mean, if they're not worthy goals, then you're not going to feel like you're jumping out of bed for the right purpose. But I'm just a big fan of it, and I think if you're not doing that, whoever's listening, if you're not doing that, try it for literally give it 30 days, and it will transform you. I really truly believe that. Yeah,
and I'm going to say give it 90, because the research shows that you begin to form the habit in 3 weeks. And if you're doing it for 90, then you're almost, if you're really doing it, you can, by the end of 90 days, it'll be part of the fabric of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Be successful, keeping it going get that first 30 out of the way. That's exciting. So you mentioned the idea of culture. I want to backtrack on that a little bit.
Okay.
Culture is always seen as this fuzzy, vague thing we can't measure. And, hey, I'm too busy doing dentistry to work on that woo-woo crap. And so we don't see any purpose to it. And I really believe it's central to the practice. And great research is showing that when you pay attention to the human factor, you end up making more money. Give us your perspective on culture.
Oh, wow. It's funny. Craig and I get that. I think this is where Craig and I have connected the most. He and I connected years ago, actually online, just kind of as a mutual admiration for each other. And I think we transparently collaborate on enhancing our culture in our offices, right? We do it because we genuinely want each other to win, and we have similar sized offices with similar cultures, very high end, high touch. And we're obsessed about bringing value to our patients. And I think as the leaders of our respective practices, our team picks up on that. They pick up on the authenticity of that. So culture isn't something that like, okay, here's our motto, here's our,
right.
Here's our vision.
Report.
Here's our vision. Yeah. We wrote a vision and we put it in a drawer. Like, right. I think culture is a living, breathing act. And every day you get a chance to enhance or decrease your culture.
Real quickly, I memorized this years ago. I found the classic definition of culture, and it's really makes sense. The classic definition of culture is a set of norms and values that are strongly held and widely shared. And they're strongly held if they're widely shared. If people are talking, it's not something in your drawer. So, I really appreciate that you're saying that. It just affirms that's real culture.
Yeah. And, and so not to get into the kind of the advertising and culture, but Craig and I also talk about it. They're very intimately entwined, and people say, well, what are y'all doing for marketing? And what's the, looking for the magic bullet. And we both contend all we try to do in our marketing efforts is amplify the culture in which we have, right? And I mean that by the fun we're having at work, the value we're bringing to our patients, like amplifying all of that stuff. We have philanthropy programs that we get aligned with as a team every month, that if we hit certain metrics in our collections, that we actually then can write big checks. We actually have those like Price is Right checks. So that's one way, and just creating that culture of true teamwork and true kind of being obsessed with someone other than yourself at work. Because the people I think are really focused on me, and what's in it for me, and I think that's not a bad thing. But I think when you can get to a team environment and be really obsessed with the outcome and just being part of the team and the teamwork, I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we've only got a few, excuse me, we'll cut that out. We've only got a few minutes left, but I'd like you to talk a little bit about your summit coming up. You've got a Bulletproof Practice Summit coming up in October. Yes. It's a lot of things you put in the book, the Bulletproof Practice, but talk about that. You and Dr. Craig and some other folks are putting this soiree together in Atlanta.
Yeah. So the summit is going to take place in October 11th and 12th in Atlanta, or maybe it's 12th and 13th. I get confused on the dates. So let's earmark it 11th through 13th. At the St. Regis in Atlanta. It's our first one. We truly did it, Chuck, and this is if you've ever listened to our podcast or your listeners have ever listened to our podcast, we do it. We don't take sponsors. It's truly the altruism and us wanting to pay it forward and give it back, because we've been blessed by so many mentors before us. And the summit was really no different. It wasn't, oh, let's see if we can just have an ego fest and generate a lot of, revenue or whatever. It was truly to leave everything on the table, to give all the secrets and collaboration and the masterminding that we can to the people that attend. And it goes over the four pillars of what our book is. And it talks about, all these things we've mentioned, the financials and the marketing and the leadership and the vision. And those are the four pillars in which we feel makes a practice bulletproof. So we, over a day and a half, are going to really dive deep into a lot of that. We have a lot of interesting speakers, and the speakers, we're doing it kind of TED style, with the exception of Craig and I. We're not doing the TED Talks, but our speakers only get 20 minutes to really bulletproof and lay down their message, because we want the event to be the fire hose where you can go back Monday morning and literally, pin the needle on kind of progress in your practice. And we actually give it a 10x guarantee, which I was passionate about when Craig and I started talking about this. I said, look, people are going to spend their time and money. And I've been to conferences where I've spent both of those, and I've been more pissed off about the waste of time than it hasn't been of value. Yeah. And so I said, let's give it a 10x guarantee, because I really want people to feel like this is going to be worth their time. And the 10x guarantee is essentially, if you don't 10x the cost of what you spent coming to this conference, then we'll give you your money back. Because, if we didn't create the value, then I sure as heck don't want the reward of your dollars.
That's valid. That's the way we ought to do it. So how can people find out about the podcast?
Yeah, Bulletproof. The website for the summit is bulletproofsummit.com, and the practice is the Bulletproof Dental Practice. And it's, it's a podcast on iTunes and such like that.
Awesome. Well, cool, man. Well, I'm excited about what you guys are doing. We'll look forward to hearing the update from how the summit went, and keep us posted. Keep going.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it.
You bet. If this podcast was helpful, please subscribe by computer or by phone, or connect with us at www.gottsummit.com, 2 T's, GOTT summit.com. That stands for Get Off the Treadmill. We have those summits quarterly for dental practitioners only. Or connect with us at www.chuckblakeman.com, or email us at grow@cranksetgroup.com. Let's get off that treadmill. Let's get into the participation age. I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast. Thanks.